So here's a video of a flight into Haiphong, Katbi Airport, and a few things were mismanaged. So let's have a look at it. So currently we're passing 5,500 feet, 25 miles. Let's do a profile calculation, see if everything is, if we're on profile. So 20 miles times 3 is 6,000 feet. And we are doing, let's say 250 knots. So we should be at 4,000 feet plus the 5 miles should be 5,500 feet. So 25 miles we should be at 5,500 feet for 250 knots. So it looks like we're on profile. So far so good. Okay, so let's skip ahead a bit. So we're approaching the start of the approach called Viau, and now we're going to approach the cleared level from the chart 4,000 feet. So let's see if that matches up with the profile. We go back a little bit. So here's 21 miles. So 20 miles times 3, 4,000 feet. And the speed, okay, the speed is a bit in the middle between 250 and green dot speed. So, well, we can calculate for both, see how it adds up. So if we take 250 knots, then, so we take 20 times 3, that's 6,000 feet, minus 2,000 to slow down, so that's 4,000 feet. And it looks like we are on profile. Okay, so let's wait until we're at 20 miles, and for 250 knots we're on profile. Maybe a little bit below profile because we're not actually 250 knots. So far so good. However, we are now going to level off. And if you are on profile and you're going to level off, because you cannot descend further, you have to reduce your speed. So let's see if that happens. And the time you have to do that is when it goes into alt star. Or actually, if I go back a little bit, so the first officer here went into, so first he was into descent mode and then he changed into vertical speed mode here. Now this is generally not what you want to do unless there's traffic below, because if you are on profile and you change to vertical speed, there might be a chance that the aircraft will increase power depending where the speed bug is relative to the current speed. So you really want to just let the aircraft continue to descend into a descent mode or open descent, whichever mode you are in. And then as soon as it goes into alt star, that's when you want to reduce the speed bug if you are on profile, or worse, above profile. So instead he reduces the speed to 800 feet a minute. Then it might put a little power on. Okay, no, not quite yet, so it will do soon though. Yeah, there you go. So now a little bit of power is put on. Now this is not what you want if you are on profile. And then he reduces the speed to 500 feet a minute. I'm sorry, the vertical speed is reduced to 500 feet a minute. This is definitely not what you want to do if you're on profile, because that will cause the thrust to increase, and you will be even higher on profile. So as we calculated before, we are on profile you're at 20 miles and you need to descend further, but you can't do that because of the altitude constraint, so you should reduce speed. So that's another mistake. So the speed bug is not reduced here, or at least not in time. So there's alt star. Okay, so now the speed bug is reduced, so that's correct. However, it's a bit late because there was a little bit of power applied by the aircraft. Okay, so now the question is how far should you reduce the speed? Now that depends on how far away you are from the airfield. If you are very far, then there's no point slowing down all the way to F speed, especially not if you are on the high side. But in this case, you are quite close to the airfield. So if you need to descend but you can't, you should just keep slowing down and apply flap as needed. Now it's a bit hard to see the display here due to the glare of the sun, but so as we approach the Viau, you will see that at some point the thrust starts to increase again because the speed is reaching the bugged speed. Okay, so this is again not what you want. You want to select flap 1 and then reduce the speed. So manage the speed and then select flap 1. Okay, now after Viau we can descend further. And you should not wait with that because you are already a little bit high on profile in this case. And if you're going to descend a bit late, then of course that will make the situation even worse. Now let's do another profile calculation here. So it's a little bit hard to see on the display, but at the moment we are at 16 miles here. Now at 15 miles, just know by heart, it's 4,500 feet, but that's without the altitude, that's without the speed correction. So because we're doing green dot speed at the moment, you should fly 1,000 feet lower. So instead of 4,500 feet, you should fly at 3,500 feet. Now, of course, you cannot do that because of the altitude constraint. So the way to solve that is to slow down. But again, that's not done here. Okay, so there's Viau. If you want to be exact, look at the top right corner, and then that's exactly where you overhead Viau, because it's 0 miles, and you should start the descent straight away. Now the next altitude wasn't set, so this will cause a delay. Okay, so let's continue the video. So just past Viau, and now we really need to start descending. We can descend to 3,000 feet. Okay. Now there's the next altitude set here, so it's a little bit late. In the meantime, the aircraft added power, so that's not what you want. Okay, so here's the next mistake. Now vertical speed is set. Okay, you could do that. You could use open descent or vertical speed, but anytime you use vertical speed and you are on profile or worse above profile, then you need to make sure that the speed buck is below the current speed to force the thrusted idle. If the speed buck is at the current speed or worse above, then the aircraft might add power. Well, it will definitely add power if the speed buck is a little bit higher than the current speed, which you will see right now or just in a moment. So okay, so if I just backtrack a little bit again, so to see exactly where at 15 miles, so it's 16, there's 15, right? So we should be at 4,000. Well, if you're at 4,500 feet at 15 miles, that means you're exactly on the glide slope. So we are a little bit below the glide slope. Not a real glide slope, of course. That goes. That's an extension of the line here. But let's say the 3-degree slope. We are at the moment at if you are at 15 miles at 4,500 feet, that means you are on a 3-degree slope. Okay, but with that speed, like I said before, you should be actually 500 feet lower. So we are a little bit high on profile. Now there's also a little bit of tailwind, and looking at the weight, it's 60.3 tons, so that's kind of normal weight. It's nothing too heavy or light. Okay. Now anytime you are high on energy, you should apply drag. Now when you are actually high on energy, 500 feet at 15 miles, I would count that as as a little bit high on energy, especially considering the tailwind. So you should really apply some speed brake here. However, that is not done. Okay, so continuing the video again. So now the next altitude is set, 3,000 feet, and we're starting our descent with 700 feet a minute. So that is not really enough if you are a bit above profile. And now, okay, so here there's another mistake made. The vertical speed was reduced from 700 feet to 600 feet a minute. That doesn't make sense. If you are high on profile, you shouldn't reduce it, because that will make it worse. The other thing is that the speed buck was just increased. If you go back a little bit, so and run the video again, you see there, the speed buck was just increased. This is a classic mistake. If you are high on profile, you should either do open descent and speed up, or vertical speed, speed down. In this case, we are in vertical speed, so the speed buck should be brought down, so reduced, not increased, because otherwise the aircraft will outpower. And you'll see that happening right there. There goes the power on, because the aircraft says, okay, you want 600 feet a minute, good, so I'm going to raise the nose to give you 600 feet a minute, and you put the speed buck higher, so I'm going to add power so that you will maintain that speed or reach that speed. And of course, that's not what you want, because you're already high on profile. Okay, so let's continue the video. So continuing descent, the aircraft adds power, and at this moment you should know already that you're going to be high on energy even more. Now as we turn to the left to intercept the final track, there's a slight arc here, it's very small, then you will see the glide slope will become valid as we become closer to the localizer, and in this case it goes straight into glide slope star and log star. Okay, good. We're not above the glide slope. That's a bonus. However, there's a few other things which are done incorrectly here, as I will show. So okay, so now the speed bug is reduced. That's correct. That's good. That will force a trusted idle. But we are basically now on the glide slope with no flap, or at green dot speed, and that is not a situation you want to be in. So even though you are on the glide slope, you are still high on energy, because you should be at least with S speed on the glide slope, and preferably a little bit below, so you can select flap 2. But okay, so the speed is managed now, and let's see. Okay, so next we want to be able to select flap 2. Now, normally you will do that either when you pass 3000 feet. If you are 1 dot below the glide slope, you can select flap 2, or if you fly level and then at 3000 feet, and then as the glide slope comes in and it passes 1 dot below the glide slope, you can select flap 2. But in this case we cannot do that because you see me pointing here already. We cannot do that because the speed is too fast. The speed is above VFE next for flap 2. So we cannot select flap 2. Of course, you will overspeed the flaps. Now, anytime, and this is very important to remember, anytime you are passing 3000 feet when you're either on the glide slope or worse, above the glide slope, when you're passing 3000 feet and you cannot select flap 2 because you are too fast, you need to put the gear down. Otherwise, you risk flying an unstable approach. Okay, so that's what I pointed at here. When the first officer was flying, I said, okay, you're passing 3000 feet, you can't select flap 2, you need to put the gear down now. Okay, so he said, okay, gear down. Good, so we put the gear down. And this will create enough drag for the speed to reduce. Of course, if you just select the speed bug lower, it's not gonna reduce the speed, because just because the bug is lower, that does not mean that the speed can reduce. That depends if there's enough drag in order to do so. But because we are following a 3-degree path for the glide slope, the aircraft is pointing the nose down and the speed cannot reduce sufficiently on its own. That's why we need the gear. Okay, so next, anytime in this situation, you need to keep configuring and don't delay, because you need the additional drag of the flaps. So as soon as you can select flap 2, you should do so. So it's a bit hard to see on the display, but there's VFE next right there. And as soon as it's a reasonable amount below, at least 5 knots, I would say, depending on the turbulence, perhaps 10 knots below, then you should select the next flap stage. Okay, so now we can select flap 2. And also the other thing to watch out for is the trend arrow. Again, it's a bit hard to see on the display now, but the trend arrow, as soon as the tip of the trend arrow hits your speed target, which is S speed in this case, the aircraft will increase power. And this is not what you want, of course, in this situation. So just before, you should ask for the next flap stage, provided, of course, you can do that and it's not, the speed is not above VFE next. Okay, so there's flap 2. Here's the next VFE next, just below, about 5 knots below the speed target now. And as soon as it's, again, 5 or 10 knots below, depending on the amount of turbulence, you should ask for the next flap stage. So right now, you should not delay because you need the drag. So there's flap 3, and then we're waiting for the next stage where we are a little bit below VFE next, and we should ask for a flap full for the extra drag. Okay, there's flap full. We're passing 2000 feet. Okay, so now we are fully configured, the flap full and gear down. We're not stable yet. We are waiting for the speed to be at least 10 knots or 10 knots or lower than the speed bug, or I should say the app plus 10 or lower than that. And when that's achieved, we are stable. Okay, now generally you want to be stable at about 1500 feet above the ground. That gives you a little bit extra margin in case you need to be stable at 1000 feet when you're in IMC. So there's 1500 feet and we're just about stable here. So it ended all quite well. Now, I hope you enjoyed something today, and thank you for watching. If you like this video, please consider buying my book Practical Descent Energy Management. It contains loads of examples of how to manage a descent and approach, and it is the only book available on this subject. There is a paperback and an ebook version available. You can find a link in the description below.